All right, joining us now, live from New York. Without further ado, FoxNews.com contributor. She's also on the FinancialTimes.com writer. Liz, good to have you.
I'm delighted to join you. How are you?
Happy Independence Day. Liz,
yes.
Do you have anybody else when you do a column that calls you up like almost instantaneously to book you on their show? I mean, is there anybody else in the country that does that?
Actually, I don't want to burst your bubble, but yes, there are.
Oh, I thought I was the one.
No, but you're my most important and favorite. How about that?
Oh, Liz, we'll take that. But look, that happens, right? That happens because your columns are so hot. And the one that you did just the other day, I want to talk about that, which came out on July 5th in the Fiscal Times, titled Trump's Response to North Korea Provocation. Try it and you'll lose big. Can you elaborate?
Yeah. Remember, it's not the author of the column that puts the title on it. I don't know what that was supposed to mean. Here's the thing. We really have a problem in North Korea, and basically during Obama's years, and to be fair, his predecessors, everybody basically just chose to look the other way. They kind of perpetuated this notion that North Korea was this backward nation, the hermit nation. It wasn't really going to be able to follow through on its threat to develop nuclear weapons, and even more importantly, to develop the delivery mechanisms for nuclear weapons. And in Obama's case, what really makes me angry is that the route to reining in North Korea clearly goes through Beijing. You have got to get the Chinese to stop allowing critical companies to trade with North Korea, provide them the kind of material they need for this nuclear program. Obama basically ignored that totally. And why? Because he was so desperate to have the Chinese sign on to his Paris Agreement. If you remember the plaudits, the adoration that flowed from getting the Chinese to agree to this climate accord, it was gigantic. And it kind of, when you look back on Obama's 8 years, what did he really achieve? The climate accord, Obamacare, and the nuclear deal. I would say two-thirds of those things are complete bunk, which is basically Obamacare and also the nuclear agreement with Iran. But the absolute fraud was the climate agreement. And so in furtherance of actually getting the Chinese to agree to this agreement, which was nothing for them, they made no commitments under the Paris Climate Accord. They're continuing to increase their use of coal. Their emissions will continue to increase, et cetera, et cetera. Basically, we gave up every other negotiating point in furtherance of that end. And so here we are today with Pyongyang actually probably having the delivery mechanism now, certainly to ferry some kind of nuclear device to South Korea, where we have 29,000 troops, but also conceivably to the United States and certainly to Europe. So this is a really, I mean, when you assess Obama as a president, this has to be an incredibly important yardstick, and I think it's a pretty damning one.
You know, a week ago I was at the White House with Gary Cohn and Steve Mnuchin, and they outlined the action we were taking against Chinese bank called, I believe, the Kong Bank,
right,
operating in the United States, that they said was a funding mechanism, a U.S. monetary funding mechanism for the North Koreans to get hard cash in order to buy the things that they need. And they said they were basically shutting that down. They couldn't do any business in the U.S. They couldn't go through their monetary system, get cash or anything else. The Chinese shrugged it off like, yeah, whatever.
But actually, it's very significant. It's the first time that we have used the Patriot Act to go after these players, again, these enablers for North Korea. Remember, John, in the first quarter, actually I published this in this piece, and I saw the president tweeted it out. Trade with North Korea, between North Korea and China, was up 37% in the first quarter, and it has grown multiple folds in the last several years. That is not the result of a country clamping down on its trade relations or in any way trying to rein them in. And in fact, about, 4 or 5 months ago, the Wall Street Journal did an extensive story on numerous Chinese companies that were trading illicitly with the North Koreans, Chinese companies trading with North Korean companies. And again, they were detailing what kind of electronics they were providing, what kind of material, et cetera. We know this is happening. Beijing knows it's happening. There's not, in China, you don't do these things without the basically the go-ahead from the central government. So we know who the companies are. We know what they're providing. Obviously, cutting off the funding is key, but there are also efforts underway to cut off the actual flow of goods that is so damaging. And by the way, the third party in all of this is Iran. So all of this, where is North Korea getting some of their nuclear capability? They're getting it from Iran. That's a very healthy flow of information. So the two actors that basically were either ignored or even actually uplifted by the Obama administration have really now come home to present the United States with a major threat. And by the way, it's not just the United States. It's obviously Japan, too. But going back to your conversation with the Treasury guys, the other thing, I think it was Trump mentioned in the last 48 hours, the other way that North Korea gets hard currency is through guest worker programs. And he talked to al-Sisi in Egypt about not allowing North Korean workers to go to that country to earn hard currency. I guess Egypt's currency is hard by comparison to North Korea's. It's not hard compared to the dollar. But anyway, it is another opportunity for them to get money into a starving country. And that's the tragedy here, of course. It is a horrible, starving country where very few people can earn a living. So for any number of reasons, humanitarian and otherwise, this has got to stop.
Liz, has the president been played here?
Well, I mean, actually, what I think is actually very reassuring, when Xi Jinping met Trump at Mar-a-Lago, if you recall, that was supposed to be sort of a tense meeting because, of course, Donald Trump did a lot of slamming of China on the campaign trail.
Right.
He was very critical of their currency manipulation and various other things. So what came out of Mar-a-Lago was a tweet saying, basically, that China was going to help us with North Korea. Xi Jinping's a very smart guy. He saw that being Donald Trump's biggest interest. He clearly knew that the climate accord was not. So he had to change his tactics, and he did. But I got to say, very quickly, Trump turned around and I think it was 2 weeks ago, tweeted out something like, China was supposed to help us with North Korea. Kind of, that didn't work out. We appreciate their efforts. Sort of that was the message. So very quickly, he called them out, which I think is pretty good, actually, because that could have gone on. We could have play-acted that out for another year or more. But I think probably the military people behind Trump, who are a very tough team, said, you know what, this isn't going to work. China's not behaving. They're not helping, which is really the reality. So we got to call their cards here. So,
Liz, actually, the president sent that tweet out on Wednesday. He sent it out 2 days ago or one day ago.
Well, he reiterated it, but he had already sent out the thing saying, thanks very much is not working.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think he's realized, look, you got out and negotiated, and I think you hit the nail on the head. The leader of China under Obama knew he wanted climate change, so he played footsie with that, basically agreed to nothing, right? Yeah. That he would take a look at coal production in 2033. Take a look at it. I mean, the whole thing was a complete farce.
It was, and the reason the Paris Accord was ridiculous in terms of us crowing about getting China on board, there have been tens of thousands of demonstrations in China by the Chinese who are offended by the fact that their lakes turn pink when the color of the fashion world turns pink. Literally, I've seen pictures, or turns blue when the fashion industry turns blue. The dirty water, dirty air, you cannot see. I've been in Beijing when you cannot see across the street because of the pollution. It is foul, and people walk around with masks on all the time. Airplanes are grounded for days at a time because the air is so foul in Shanghai and Beijing. This is a local interest. It is locally important to Xi Jinping to make sure that their air and water gets cleaner. So, yeah, he was happy to sign on to this thing as sort of a public statement that he's interested in it while making absolutely zero commitments to the international community about what China would produce. So it was completely bogus, but also self-serving.
Well, I think they did the same thing with the North Koreans. Xi Jinping got economic leverage over Trump by saying, look, I'm the guy to help you here.
Yeah.
Meantime, they were back-channeling trade and funds to them. And my theory is that the Chinese government, the Chi-Coms, were actually encouraging North Korea to be additionally belligerent because in the short term, it increased their economic leverage over the president, took his eye off the ball, if you will. And we stopped hearing about currency manipulation, dumping steel, dumping aluminum, the things that they do. That got put on hold, and all of a sudden we were best friends with them vis-a-vis their influence in North Korea, which I believe they were doing the opposite. I mean, there's no way to say that the Chinese government was really interested in reining the North Koreans in when you look at the increase in trade they've had since January. It's like you said, 37%. You would think it would be the opposite. It would go down 37%. So the whole thing was, to me, I think the president got played.
I think that's exactly right. And again, there was a lot of big excitement in the media for a period of time that China had cut off North Korea coal exports to China, which is a major source of currency for North Korea. Turned out that they'd already fulfilled their capacity and their quota from North Korea, and in fact, China doesn't need any more coal from North Korea. So again, it was sort of make-believe, but the Chinese are very good at make-believe, and they kind of put all these sort of indeterminate measures out there, and they kind of wait to see how the media reacts, and sure enough, they generally side with China in making them look good. The truth is, it's bogus. He has been played, but you know what? He figured it out pretty quickly, which I think is good.
Liz, I got one more minute. Let me just ask you this. You've been to Beijing. How long are average citizens going to put up with the fact that they can't breathe, drink the water? I mean, the level, I've heard so many people come back from there and say, you literally cannot see out the window.
No, it's horrible.
How long are they going to put up with this?
I mean, again, schools are shut down routinely during the winter months when the air is so foul. Well, that's the point. I mean, I think that the officialdom is always worried about social tranquility in China. This is something that is really making people unhappy. So they are going to, in fact, they already have shifted around the location of some of their manufacturing facilities. They are talking about less coal usage, although right now it looks like their coal-fired production capacity is going to be rising about 20% over the next decade. There's nothing really that they can do except sort of tweak it at the edges, but they are trying to do that because people, as I say, have been taking to the streets, and that scares the leadership to death. They do not want social instability. That's always been the number one issue with them. So they are going to be clamping down on it to the extent they can without interrupting their industry.
We're out of time. I want to thank Liz Peek for being with us. Always a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you. Thanks
Liz,
for having me, John.
Thank you so much. Follow Liz at Liz Peek. You can read her fiscaltimes.com and also foxnews.com. John Fredericks Radio Network. I'll be right back.